Welcome, it's a great day to be a miner. In today's video, we're gonna tear this guy apart. We're gonna get it thermally treated and we're gonna get it ready for the Tswift upgraded firmware. This is the Iceriver Ks0 Pro Kaspa ASIC miner. And yeah, we're gonna get this thing ready and we're gonna get it humming along. But first, let's go ahead and spin that intro. And we're back. So yeah, this is the Ks0 Pro and this has the custom shroud on it. I did a previous video on that and I thermally tested all different orientations on this thing and how to get the best orientation and fan flow to get the air through this thing so that it could handle the temperatures more efficiently. So make sure to check that one out up above. But today we're going to pull this thing completely apart. We're going to first blow it out with our handy dandy XPower A2. These things are amazing. If you own any kind of mining equipment, any kind of PC equipment, I highly suggest to get one of these. I'll make sure to put a link down in the description. These things are tanks. Don't use the cheapo air in a can. This thing blows 10 times more powerful and you'll get your money's worth out of this thing easily in just a couple months use. So yeah, XPower A2, go check it out. Today we're going to tear this apart, and what are we going to do? We're going to change out, first we're going to put on the Mosfets, we're going to put some little copper heat sinks. And if you buy the Tswift software, they make sure to post that you should try to upgrade the Mosfets, and you put put heat sinks on the Mosfets, and this will keep it from overheating and thermal throttling. We're also going to repaste it with some thermal compound, some Arctic. This is the MX4. This is probably my favorite all time. Of course, there's MX5, there's Cryonaut, there's all kinds of other really good. The EVGA has a good one, like I think it's called Kingpin. It's a really good thermal compound. So yeah, any really good upgraded thermal compound will do. And then we're going to change out the thermal pads, and these are Arctic TP3 200 by 100 millimeter thermal pad. So it's 100 millimeter thickness. I think the stock ones are 50 on this, but we're going to replace the thermal pads on this guy, and then we're going to put it all back together, and then we're going to test out and see how the heat temps do, and then that way if they do well, then we'll go ahead and apply our overclock. We already have the Tswift firmware waiting to apply, and hopefully we can get a good solid 280 out of this guy, maybe 270 gigahash without having to go too nuts, and then maybe we'll look into the really upgraded Tswift software after that.
You know quantum computers, you know blockchain, but do you know both together? Dynex was the first platform to create a neuromorphic supercomputing blockchain-based algorithm which solves real-world problems. And the best part? Anyone can post a job, whether a company from the Global 2000, a machine learning job, or fintech and pharmaceutical. And if you don't want to program it yourself, get an expert directly at the marketplace. Run the job and be impressed by the fast result.
All right, we're back. So the first and foremost, we're just going to blow this thing out. We're going to knock all the dust out. We'll go ahead and make that happen, but we're not going to make you watch it. So let's do it Red Panda style. Ready, go. Magic, baby. So just like that, we got it all blown out and it's all the dust is out of there. We're gonna go ahead and pull the shroud off of it, and yeah, we'll make sure to link all these parts down in the description as well. The RGB fan, it's a USB powered fan. If you're doing overclocking, they highly advise to use a DC power, plug in directly into the wall type fan that has much more CFN than these. But for our purposes and with the additional shroud, this will be more than adequate for our regular overclocking. If we actually try to go for the 300 plus gigahash, we'll probably replace this fan as well. We'll make sure to link all of our new thermal components down in the description. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get this thing torn off. On my fan, I only have the 2 screws holding in. I didn't want to actually run them down through the shroud, but I could have. So the shroud's just kind of stuck on there and it's really hard to get off. So rather than you having to watch me struggle and wrestle it off, I'm just gonna make it happen. Ready, go. So there we go. There's our shroud, and I made a video again with it, so you can go check that out. But we're gonna set it aside, and then you can see I have the back plate that blows in from here already removed, and then on the front I have a 3D printed plate, so I'll need to pull off my fan and take off the 3D printed as well. So you know what, let's go ahead and do that as well. There you go. And there we go. We've got our mod mat laid under here so we don't scratch up our surface, and that we don't damage or at least scratch up our ASIC either. But yeah, there we go. We got the fan off, we got it stripped down, we got the plates off. Next step we will do is to the bottom side where the fans are, the two little fans right here, this whole plate will come off. So that'll be our next step. We got to take this plate off of here, and there are 6 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pop those 6 out, then use your thumbs and just pop this middle plate out, and it does take a little bit of pressure, and that will be our next step, is to pull this bottom plate off. But in true YouTube fashion, ain't nobody got no time to watch that, so let's just go ahead and make it happen. Ready, go. All right, screws are removed, and so this guy should pop right up here. I'm trying to get the best camera angle I can for you, and there you go. There's our plate that has our pads on it. Look at that, it ripped the pad off just getting it loose. So that's what we're going to be replacing with the Arctic pad over here. We're going to be putting this 100mm pad on there. You can kind of see it's not actually full coverage as it is, so maybe the thicker pad will help to cover that entire area. So we're replacing both of those strips of thermal pad on the top. Then right here in close, let's see if we can get a good look at these thermal. First, let's unhook our fans to get them out of the way. Let's take a picture of it. And that's a tip. Whenever you're working on something, as you take something apart, take pictures with your cell phone, and then that's an easy way to quick look back. I just want to remember which fan is hooked to which, so that'll be an easy way to reference back. All right, we got a screwdriver to pop the little bracket open, and then we'll just pull it out of there. There's one fan, and then there's the other. Be careful not to pull the wires, grab the plastic part. And there's our plate is free, so we'll gently scrape all this off. Look at it just crumbling. That's not very good thermal pad. We're just gonna scrape all that off, get this all cleaned off, and then that piece will be ready. And we're back. Okay, so the easy thing with this, these really came off really easy. I just used my finger and literally just kind of kept pulling away with my finger and pulled it all off there nice and neat on both it and on the top part with the fan, the actual casing. And then I used some 99% alcohol. This stuff is amazing for cleaning. I'll link it down in the description. This is great for electronics. So I used it and I just lightly wiped both surfaces to get it completely cleaned off. Before I actually put the new pad on, I think I'm gonna go ahead and take the board off, and I'm gonna repaste underneath the actual ASIC chips, and then I'll put the board back in. Then we'll do the Mosfet replacement heat sinks. We'll add the heat sinks on the Mosfets, and then we're going to go ahead and put the new thermal stripping on there, so the new thermal pads. So that's the order we'll do. That way we're not messing with one when we're doing the other, because if I go ahead and do the thermal pad and I go ahead and do the Mosfet, then I have to take the whole plate off, and then I'm kind of messing with them and touching them when I don't want to. So let's go ahead and take the board out. Now the board has a number of screws in it. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total screws in here. And they have the little spring tensioner screws, just like you would on a CPU cooler or a CPU, something like that, where you have the little spring that way you don't over tighten. You just give it a good hand tighten down to where it's completely snug on all of them, and that's how you can kind of tell. So next we're going to take out these 8 screws, and then we're going to work on getting that board out of there. Remember, it's thermal pasted down to the chips, to the heatsink, so a little pressure might be needed, and a little rocking back and forth gently to get the board up out after we take the screws out. Let's go ahead and take those screws out like that. There we go. All 8 screws are out, and these actually have a little bit of a finer thread on them. So yeah, I had to use a smaller screwdriver. All right, like that guy. This is a great Scepter screwdriver. These things are amazing. Yeah. So anyway, let's pop this board out or see how hard it's in there. Well, let's see, look at that. Proving me wrong. I barely touched it. Bam, right up and out. So now let's look at the ASIC chips underneath. And hopefully we can get a good view. See everywhere that the thermal paste is. We're gonna clean all that off, and then we're gonna clean the heatsink, and we're gonna repaste it with our MX4 right here. And I'll make sure again to link down in the description for this. And we're just gonna clean that off. First, I'm going to use just a rag and try to pull it. And I know I've already watched Vega do this, Serpent Special Forces, so make sure to check out his channel. But when he did, at first he scraped kind of the side. You want to kind of move it up with the chips, and that way it's easier to clean and you don't spread that thermal compound onto the other parts of the board where it's harder. If you get it down in between there, it won't hurt anything, but it's a lot harder to actually deal with and get it out. So we'll use that. We'll use our 99% alcohol. We also have some CPU cleaner and CPU purifier, and that's probably what I'll actually use on the chips after I get the bulk of it wiped up. Let me show you that real quick. And here's what that is. This is the thermal material remover, and this is the thermal surface purifier. And these are really great kit to use for CPUs to clean off your thermal compound and then to prep for the next reapplication. So actually, after I do a quick wipe and get most of this off, I'll use probably some Q-tips or just a light rag and use this to get it nice and clean. And then we'll be ready to repaste and put it back together. Let's go ahead and do it. Bam, there it is, baby. So I took and cleaned them off really good. First, I just used my hand and scraped with a rag and wiped most of the thermal compound off. Then I used some 99% alcohol, and I used a rag. Then I used Q-tips, and then I used the thermal remover compound, and then I used the thermal surface purifier. You don't need to use all that. Simple rubbing alcohol will suffice, and I did do it pretty well. I'm sure it could be done a little bit better, and you really don't have to go this crazy on it. I used probably about 12 Q-tips and tried to get down around mostly. And so yeah, there it is, completely clean and ready to go. And then we're gonna put our MX4, a little dot on each chip. And then that way we can go ahead and install the board right back in and then tighten it back down, and that part will be completed. So let's go ahead and put on our thermal compound. Let's go. All right, the thermal paste has been reapplied to all the chips, and I have put the board back into place. Note to tighten the screws down into more of a star pattern, much like you would do with a motherboard or a CPU. So I started with the middle and I went 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I came to the outsides and I did 1, 2, 3, 4, then back to the middle and retighten them the rest of the way in, and then back to the outside and retighten them in. That way you're getting a nice even pressure across the entire board. So yeah, there it is, it's reinstalled. And now we can move on to the part where we put our thermal pads on here, and then also where we put our heat sinks down on the Mosfet. So let's go ahead and move to the Mosfet part next, and let's glue those on. So let's open these up. These are, what size are these? These are, I believe they're 6 by 6, 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters by 4 millimeters tall. Actually, these are the 3 millimeter tall, but I also have some 4 millimeter tall. So they're just tiny little cute little copper things. Hopefully we can get a good look at that, but it's just a tiny little copper sink like that. So anyway, we're gonna put one of those on each of these Mosfet chips, not on these big pieces. Right in front of there are 4 little chips. Those are your Mosfets. Those are part of what causes the overheating and that you need so much airflow to. Adding these will actually add more surface area, which will be more cooling area. So when the air comes in across them, it will help to cool the board itself, the Mosfets, and it won't overheat or shut down. So yeah, these come with thermal pads. But instead of using the thermal pads, I'm going to actually use the thermal glue, and then just paste them on, let them dry. Then once they're dry, then I'll put my thermal pads on, and then it'll be ready to put the casing back on and reassemble this guy. So yeah, let's do it. And bam, there's our heat sinks all stuck on there all nice and neat. We use thermal glue to stick it on there. Again, we'll link these all down in the description. So there, now we're gonna let this dry a little and get a little more tacky before we move it around too much. But the next step is to replace the thermal pads here, and then we can put our shell back on. Let's do that next. Go. All right, so here's the pads that we're using. These are Arctic. It's a 200 by 100 millimeter sheet. So let's open this up. It's a 100 millimeter thickness. The stock are around a 50. So these are actually much thicker and should squeeze out a little better. It was actually suggested to use 150. I went with a 100. This is in the sheet, so I need to cut nice strips of it to fit into here. So I'm going to measure it, cut a couple nice little strips on here, and then we're going to lay them in there. Let's do it. All right, just like that, we have new thermal pads applied. So how did we do that? This came in a single sheet like so. And then we measured, and we made it a half-inch wide by 6.5 inches long. We just took a mark on each side. We put a ruler across there, drew a couple nice straight lines, cut them out, and then we removed the backing on a strip. We laid down the strip, same thing with the other, and then we pulled the clear plastic off the top. So now it's ready for us to put our shell back on there. And there's what it looks like. We've got our new Mosfet heat sinks. We've got new thermal paste underneath, and now we have new thermal pads. So yeah, let's go ahead and put our top on. Ready, go. All right, so there she is, got the cover back on, and just like everything else, when you're putting it together, you want to do even pressure. So it's got the 6 screws, so just put them in all loosely, and then you want to tighten alternating, and then that way you get a nice even pressure from the plate onto the new thermal pads, and it should squish the pads slightly out on the back of that. And you might be able to see a little bit of the blue in there. I don't know, probably, but right in here you can see the blue being squished out by the frame pushing down on it, that rail, the 2 rails that go right there. So yeah, there it is. It's completely done, except I need to go ahead and put our shroud and our fan back on. So let's do that, and then we'll talk about this thing. All right, so there you have it. I've got it all put back together. I've got my new shroud back on there, and I've got the fan on the outside. We've got the new Mosfet heat sinks. We've got new thermal pad and new thermal paste, and we're gonna let this thing set and cure for a little while, especially that thermal paste. We're going to let it, actually the thermal glue, we're gonna let it dry and make sure those heat sinks are on there well before we fire this thing back up and heat it back up. But yeah, there it is, and this is what the recommended workflow is if you're going to really overclock these pros so that you can get adequate heating or cooling to get that heat out of the system and to push this thing a little farther than stay the standard 200 gigahash. I'm hoping to at least get 280 out of this thing and to run cool and efficient. So yeah, the next step is to let it dry, then we're going to test it out and heat test it and see how much of a difference this actually made. Was it worth it? And then of course we're going to overclock it and we're going to push it to the max. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up for today's video. Make sure to check out the links if you need to find any of these items that we used in today's rebuild. And if you're new to mining, make sure to join the Misfit Mining Discord. There's always plenty of seasoned vets in there willing to help you out. And if you like the video, you know what to do. Smash that like button and subscribe for future content. Thanks for coming along and enjoy the ride.